Dear listener, welcome once more to the Hercule Poirot Story podcast, where the little grey cells awaken to unravel the most perplexing enigmas of the human soul. Tonight, we transport you to the shadowed halls of Harrington Manor, a grand estate nestled in the verdant yet foreboding English countryside of the 1920s, a time when the remnants of Edwardian grandeur clashed with the encroaching modernity of jazz and motorcars. Picture, if you will, a stormy autumn eve. Rain lashes against leaded windows like accusing fingers. The wind howls through ancient oaks as if mourning secrets long buried. And a pall of unease hangs over the opulent dining hall, where fate shall serve its most lethal course. Chapter 1. The Gathering Storm. In the autumn of 1927, Harrington Manor stood resolute against the tempestuous skies of Sussex, its ivy-clad towers piercing the heavens like the spires of some ancient cathedral. Nestled amidst rolling hills, where emerald meadows gave way to shadowed copses, the manor was a monument to aristocratic endurance, its weathered stones whispering tales of centuries past. Yet, beneath its grandeur, marble columns, leaded windows agleam with the flicker of candelabras, lurked an air of subtle decay, as if the very walls mourned the waning fortunes of the Harrington lineage in this brave new world of the post-Great War era. The manor, inherited through generations, was both a bastion of tradition and a crucible of concealed resentments, its opulence a facade for the tensions that simmered within. Tonight, Lord Reginald Harrington, the estate's formidable patriarch, had summoned a select coterie to his annual banquet, a ritual cloaked in the guise of conviviality, but invariably steeped in rivalry and unspoken grievances. Lord Harrington, a robust industrialist of 55 summers, was a man whose presence commanded deference. His frame was broad, his shoulders squared as if hewn from the iron his factories forged, his florid cheeks framed by a mane of silver hair that lent him the aspect of a lion in winter. His occupation as a titan of industry, supplying the machinery of empire, locomotives, armaments, and the sinews of commerce, their own secrets, their motives veiled behind the decorum of polite society. First across the threshold was Lady Amelia Harrington, the victim's wife, a vision of ethereal beauty at 42. Her porcelain skin, unmarred by the passage of years, glowed beneath the chandelier's golden light, and her raven hair, swept into an elegant chignon, gleamed like polished jet. Her eyes, a piercing emerald, held a depth that suggested both sorrow and defiance, as if she gazed upon a world that had both enchanted and betrayed her. Clad in a gown of emerald silk that cascaded like a waterfall, she moved with the grace of a swan, yet her delicate fingers betrayed a faint tremor, a telltale sign of a soul in turmoil. Psychologically, Lady Amelia was a study in restrained passion. Outwardly the consummate hostess, her smiles practiced and her courtesies impeccable, she was inwardly a maelstrom of suppressed desires. Her marriage to Lord Harrington, though gilded with wealth, was a cage of convention, its bars forged by societal expectation and his domineering will. Whispers of an illicit liaison, a distant cousin perhaps, glimpsed at society galas, hinted at her yearning for escape, whether through love or the promise of inheritance. Her motive, should death visit her husband, was as clear as the crystal goblets awaiting the banquet: freedom, and the vast estate that would fall to her command. Following her, with the slouch of a man burdened by his own inadequacies, came Arthur Harrington, the prodigal son. At 28, he was a lanky figure, his auburn hair perpetually disheveled, as if he had just risen from a night of debauchery. His handsome features, high cheekbones, a jaw sharp enough to cut glass, were marred by a perpetual scowl,
etching lines of discontent that aged him beyond his years. His gait, languid and unsteady, spoke of indolence born of privilege, his dinner jacket ill-fitting as though borrowed from his father's wardrobe. Arthur's psyche was a battlefield of entitlement and desperation. Years of squandered opportunities had left him mired in gambling.
His ascent betrayed his roots. Psychologically, Slade was a labyrinth of ambition and calculation, his mind ever weighing profit against loss. His motive stemmed from a recent merger dispute where Harrington's ruthless tactics had outmaneuvered him, leaving Slade's enterprises teetering on the brink of ruin. The banquet for him was a battlefield of pride, where smiles concealed a smoldering desire for retribution, perhaps through sabotage, or something darker. The maid, Eliza Thorne, though not a guest, was a presence as integral to the manor as its ancient beams. A slight woman of 30, her mousy brown hair tucked beneath a starched cap, her freckled cheeks flushed from exertion, she moved with the silent efficiency of one accustomed to invisibility. Her eyes, however, darted like those of a cornered fox, betraying a mind alert to every nuance of the household. Eliza's psychology was steeped in quiet rage. Years of servitude had eroded her spirit, her resentment amplified by a whispered secret. Lord Harrington's past indiscretion, an affair with her sister, now dead by her own hand after disgrace, had shattered her family's honor. Her presence at the banquet, serving with mechanical precision, masked a heart that burned for justice, her motive a vendetta that simmered beneath her subservient facade. Dr. Elena Voss, a guest whose enigmatic aura set her apart, completed the assembly. A statuesque woman of 45, hailing from Vienna, her silver-streaked blonde hair was pulled into a severe bun, accentuating her sharp, aquiline features. Her eyes, a cold blue, surveyed the room with clinical detachment, as if dissecting the souls around her. Clad in a high-necked gown of charcoal gray, she exuded an air of intellectual superiority, her movements precise as a surgeon's. Psychologically, Dr. Voss was a fortress of intellect, her mind a repository of medical knowledge and suppressed fury. Her motive was rooted in a hidden connection to Harrington's wartime dealings. His factories had supplied arms that devastated her homeland, leaving scars both physical and emotional. Her invitation to the banquet, ostensibly a nod to her steel trap, parsing human folly with relentless precision. His presence at Harrington Manor was no accident. Poirot sensed, with the instinct of a bloodhound, that the air was thick with intrigue, and his little gray cells were already stirring, eager to unravel the threads of destiny. As the guests assembled in the drawing room, a cavernous chamber adorned with tapestries depicting pastoral scenes now faded with age, the atmosphere was one of strained civility. The fire in the massive hearth crackled, casting shadows that danced like specters across the paneled walls. A grand piano stood silent in one corner, its ebony surface reflecting the storm's lightning flashes through the tall windows. The guests sipped sherry, their conversation a delicate dance of pleasantries masking deeper tensions. "My dear Poirot," boomed Lord Harrington, his voice a gravelly baritone that filled the room like a cannon's report. "You grace us with your presence. Tell me, does the English weather not remind you of the mists of Brussels?" Poirot inclined his head, a faint smile playing beneath his mustaches. "Ah, monsieur, the weather is but a backdrop to the drama of the human heart. And here, at Harrington Manor, I sense a play most intriguing, one where the actors conceal their true roles." Lady Amelia, her smile as fragile as the glass in her hand, interjected, "Monsieur Poirot, you flatter us with your poet's tongue. Surely our humble gathering is but a simple affair." "Simple?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Madame, in simplicity lies the greatest complexity. The heart, it hides its secrets well." Arthur, lounging against a bookcase, snorted softly. "Father's banquets are never simple. Always some scheme brewing, business or otherwise." Slade, swirling his sherry, fixed Arthur with a steely gaze. "Youth speaks boldly, but empires are built on schemes, young Harrington." Dr. Voss, standing apart, her posture rigid, observed silently, her lips pursed as if withholding a diagnosis. Eliza, moving among them with a tray of seemed to pulse with the weight of history, as if the very stones whispered of feasts and follies long past. Mahogany tables, polished to a mirror-like sheen, groaned under the weight of silver candelabra, their myriad flames dancing like restless spirits, casting flickering shadows that played upon the faces of the assembled company. Crystal goblets, delicate as spun sugar, caught the candlelight and refracted it into rainbows that shimmered across the damask tablecloths, their beauty a stark contrast to the brooding storm outside. The leaded windows, lashed by sheets of rain, rattled in their ancient frames, the wind's mournful howl a chorus to the gathering tension within. It was as if nature itself, in its tempestuous fury, conspired to seal this microcosm of society from the world beyond, transforming the hall into a stage where human passions would unfold in a drama most sinister. Lord Reginald Harrington presided at the head of the table, his imposing figure dominating the scene like a monarch of old. His tailored dinner jacket, straining slightly against his robust frame, broad shoulders, a barrel chest, and florid cheeks touched by the ruddy glow of good living, lent him an air of unassailable authority. His silver hair, swept back from a high forehead, gleamed under the chandelier's golden light, and his deep-set eyes, sharp as a hawk's, surveyed his guests with a mixture of pride and imperious scrutiny. As an industrialist whose factories forged the machinery of empire, he was accustomed to command, his voice a gravelly baritone that carried the weight of unquestioned dominion. Yet beneath his outward vigor, there lingered a faint shadow of unease, as if he sensed the currents of resentment swirling around him. The guests took their seats with the practiced decorum of high society, their movements choreographed by years of adherence to etiquette, yet each betrayed subtle tells of their inner turmoil. Lady Amelia Harrington, seated to her husband's right, was a vision of elegance in her emerald silk gown, its folds cascading like a verdant waterfall. Her porcelain skin glowed in the candlelight, but her emerald eyes, though radiant, held a flicker of disquiet, handsome yet marred by a scowl that spoke of chronic discontent. At 28, his high cheekbones and sharp jaw were those of a matinee idol, but his bloodshot eyes and unsteady hands hinted at nights spent in gambling dens and gin-soaked revelry. His psyche was a battlefield of entitlement and desperation. His father's refusal to settle his mounting debts had fostered a bitter envy, a belief that the Harrington fortune was his by right. As he toyed with his napkin, his fingers restless, his motive, greed, or perhaps a desire to seize control, cast a shadow as dark as the storm outside. Mr. Victor Slade, Lord Harrington's business partner, sat opposite Arthur, his burly frame filling his chair with the solidity of a granite statue. His ruddy complexion and mutton-chop whiskers gave him the air of a Victorian industrialist, his grey eyes piercing beneath bushy brows. Clad in a tailored suit that strained against his muscular build, he exuded the confidence of a self-made man. Yet his calloused hands, relics of his humbler origins, betrayed a past of toil. Psychologically, Slade was a fortress of ambition, his mind ever calculating profit and loss, his smile a mask for the cunning that had propelled him to wealth. His motive was rooted in a recent business dispute. Lord Harrington's ruthless outmaneuvering in a merger had left Slade's enterprises teetering on ruin, a betrayal that fueled a smoldering desire for retribution. As he raised his glass, his smile was a thin veneer over a gaze that never left his host. Eliza Thorne, the maid, moved silently among the guests, her slight figure almost invisible in her starched uniform and cap. Her mousy brown hair was tucked neatly away, her freckled cheeks flushed from the heat of the kitchen. But her eyes, dark and darting like those of a hunted creature, betrayed a mind alert to every nuance. At 30, her life of servitude had etched lines of quiet rage upon her psyche. A whispered secret, Lord Harrington's seduction of her sister, leading to her ruin and suicide, had left a wound that festered still. Her motive, a vendetta born of personal loss, was steady, dissecting the room with surgical precision. Hercule Poirot, the diminutive Belgian detective, occupied a seat near the foot of the table, his egg-shaped head gleaming under the chandelier, his waxed mustaches a work of art in their precision. His patent leather shoes reflected the candlelight, and his green eyes, sharp as cut emeralds, missed no detail, the flicker of a glance, the clench of a fist. Clad in an immaculate dinner jacket, he was a study in fastidious elegance, his every gesture deliberate, his Belgian accent lending a melodic cadence to his words. Psychologically, Poirot was a paradox, courteous to a fault, yet relentless in his pursuit of truth, his little gray cells already stirring as he sensed the undercurrents of intrigue. His invitation to the banquet, a whim of Lord Harrington's, was no coincidence. Poirot's presence was a magnet for mystery, and he knew this night would test his acumen. The meal unfolded with exquisite formality, each course a testament to the manor's culinary prowess. A consommé of pheasant, delicate yet rich, was followed by roasted quail, its flesh succulent beneath a glaze of Madeira. Each dish was paired with vintages from Harrington's cellar, the claret and burgundy flowing like the conversation. Superficial at first, a veneer of civility over the roiling tensions beneath. The violin quartet, tucked in a corner, played strains of Vivaldi, their notes a fragile counterpoint to the storm's relentless assault. "Father," Arthur ventured, his voice laced with petulance as he speared a quail, "your latest venture in steel, does it not risk the family name? Debts mount, yet you hoard like Midas, leaving me to beg for scraps." Lord Harrington's laugh was a thunderclap, resonating through the hall. "Boy, learn the value of enterprise. Your gambling dens will not inherit my empire. Slade here understands. Our partnership shall forge new horizons." Slade raised his glass, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Indeed, Reginald, though one must ensure the forge is not sabotaged by internal discord." His words, though polite, carried a barb, his gaze lingering on Harrington with the intensity of petulance. Slade's veiled hostility, Amelia's forced charm, Voss' cryptic reserve, and Eliza's silent vigilance, all were threads in a tapestry of deception that Poirot's little gray cells were already weaving together. As the main course gave way to a sorbet palate cleanser, the atmosphere thickened, pregnant with unspoken accusations. The storm outside raged on, its lightning illuminating the hall in stark flashes, as if nature itself demanded truth. Poirot, ever the observer, sensed the crescendo approaching, his instincts whispering that this banquet was no mere gathering, but the prelude to a tragedy most profound. Chapter 3. The Silent Strike. The banquet hall of Harrington Manor, moments ago a tableau of opulence and strained civility, transformed in an instant into a theater of chaos, its grandeur marred by the specter of death. The long mahogany table, laden with the remnants of a sumptuous feast, roasted quail, crystal goblets half filled with claret, and silver candelabra, casting their flickering light, stood as a silent witness to the calamity that had just unfolded. The tapestries, depicting heraldic lions and pastoral scenes, seemed to gaze down with mournful judgment, their faded threads absorbing the shock that rippled through the air. Outside, the storm raged with unabated fury, its gales howling like banshees, the rain lashing the leaded windows as if accusing fingers pointed at the guilty soul within. The atmosphere, thick with the scent of wax and wine, now carried a new note, a faint, sinister hint of almonds that lingered like a whispered confession. Lord Reginald Harrington, the indomitable patriarch, had been mid-sentence, his gravelly baritone extolling the virtues of prosperity in a toast to his guests. To empire, to progress, to— His words faltered, his florid face contorting in a rictus of surprise, as if an unseen hand had seized his throat. His broad shoulders, so commanding moments before, slumped. His hand, clutching a goblet, spasmed, sending ruby liquid spilling across the damask cloth like blood. No cry escaped his lips, only a faint gurgle, soft as wide with horror, or perhaps a well-rehearsed facsimile thereof. Her porcelain hands flew to her mouth, her sapphire ring glinting as she rose, her emerald silk gown rustling like leaves in the wind. Yet even in her apparent distress, Poirot noted the flicker of calculation in her gaze, a momentary pause before her cry, as if her mind weighed the consequences of this sudden tragedy. Her psychological profile, restrained passion cloaked in the role of dutiful wife, suggested a motive of freedom and inheritance, but her reaction was too perfect, too poised, to be entirely unstudied. Arthur Harrington, the prodigal son, leaped to his feet, his lanky frame knocking over his chair with a clatter. His auburn hair fell into his bloodshot eyes, his handsome features twisted in what might have been shock, or a performance of it. "Father!" he exclaimed, his voice cracking with a petulance that seemed more theatrical than genuine. His hands, unsteady from nights of debauchery, hovered over the table, as if unsure whether to reach for his father or retreat from the scene. Psychologically, Arthur was a maelstrom of entitlement and desperation, his gambling debts a noose tightening around his future. His motive, greed, or the desire to seize the Harrington fortune, was palpable, yet his clumsy reaction suggested either innocence or a lack of foresight in his deception. Mr. Victor Slade, the business partner, blanched to an ashen pallor, his burly frame rigid as he stared at the fallen lord. His mutton-chop whiskers quivered, his grey eyes darting from the goblet to the faces around him, as if seeking the culprit in their midst. His ruddy hands gripped the table's edge, knuckles whitening, a physical tell of shock, or perhaps fear of exposure. Slade's psyche, a fortress of ambition and cunning, harbored a motive rooted in financial ruin. Lord Harrington's ruthless tactics in their recent merger had left him teetering on the brink, a betrayal that could drive a man to desperate measures. Yet his stillness, his refusal to act, suggested either genuine surprise or a calculated restraint. Dr. Elena Voss, the Viennese physician, rose with the calm precision of her profession, her silver-streaked hair catching the candlelight as she moved to Lord Harrington's side, her aquila from her hands, clattering to the floor, her freckled cheeks drained of color, her dark eyes wide with panic or guilt. She stood rooted, her starched cap askew, as if the weight of the moment pinned her to the spot. Her psychology, steeped in quiet rage over her sister's ruin at Harrington's hands, made her a suspect of vengeance, Yet her shock seemed too raw, too unfeigned to align with premeditation. Or was it another layer of deception? Hercule Poirot, seated near the foot of the table, remained still, his egg-shaped head tilted slightly, his green eyes gleaming like polished jade. His waxed mustaches twitched as he absorbed the scene, his patent leather shoes motionless beneath the table. "Mon Dieu!" he exclaimed at last, his voice cutting through the din like a scalpel, its Belgian cadence precise yet resonant. "It is murder most foul. No one leaves this room until the authorities arrive. But first, the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot shall commence their work." His words, delivered with theatrical gravitas, restored a semblance of order, the guests turning to him as if drawn by the magnetism of his certainty. The banquet hall, now a crime scene, revealed its secrets to Poirot's meticulous gaze. The victim's goblet, untouched by others, stood apart, its contents tainted by the faint almond scent of cyanide, a poison requiring intimate access to administer. A scrap of emerald silk, matching Lady Amelia's gown, was snagged on the leg of a chair near the head of the table, a physical clue that seemed almost too convenient. Footprints, muddied and faint, marred the polished floor near the service door, suggesting an intruder or a guest who had ventured outside in the storm. Yet Arthur's shoes, Poirot noted, bore no trace of mud, despite his earlier claim of a brief absence to the lavatory, a timeline inconsistency that prickled the detective's senses. Slade's evasive glance when questioned about the wine's provenance, Voss's steady hands despite the chaos, and Eliza's trembling hesitation, all were psychological clues, threads in a tapestry of deceit. Poirot rose, his diminutive frame commanding the room's attention. "Mes amis," he intoned, pacing with deliberate steps, his voice gruff. "Business rivals abound, but here? Preposterous." Yet his ruddy face betrayed a sheen of perspiration, a physical sign of discomfort under scrutiny. Dr. Voss, returning to her seat, offered, "As a physician, I recognize the symptoms. Cyanide is unmistakable. Yet I touched nothing but his wrist." Her tone was clinical, but her fingers, Poirot noted, tightened briefly around her napkin. Eliza, under Poirot's piercing stare, whispered, "I served as always, sir. I saw nothing." Her voice quavered, her eyes fixed on the floor, a posture of submission or concealment. Red herrings abounded. A folded letter, slipped from Harrington's pocket in his fall, hinted at blackmail, its cryptic words, "repay or regret," pointing vaguely at Slade. Yet the ink was fresh, the handwriting unfamiliar, suggesting a plant to mislead. The storm outside, sealing the manor like a tomb, ensured no one could flee, but also obscured whether an outsider had slipped in. The footprints, the fabric, the letter, all were clues, yet all could be misdirection, designed to obscure the truth. Poirot's mind, a labyrinth of logic, began to weave the threads together. The cyanide required proximity, trust, and opportunity. The almond scent, faint but unmistakable, lingered in the air, a silent accusation. The footprints suggested movement, but whose? The fabric implicated Amelia, yet its placement was too obvious. The letter pointed to Slade, but its timing was suspect. Each suspect's motive, freedom, greed, revenge, betrayal, wove a web of possibility, yet none stood out as the definitive hand of death. As the storm raged on, its lightning illuminating the hall in stark flashes, Poirot knew the truth lay hidden in the details, the gestures, the glances, the inconsistencies. "The little grey cells," he murmured to himself, "they shall uncover what the heart conceals." The banquet, intended as a celebration, had become a requiem, and the detective's work had only just begun. Shadows of suspicion. The banquet hall of Harrington Manor, once a stage for opulent revelry, now stood as a somber chamber of accusation, its grandeur tarnished by the spectre florid face hidden from view. Yet his presence loomed larger in death than in life. The guests, now suspects, remained seated or stood in uneasy clusters, their faces etched with a spectrum of emotions: shock, fear, or perhaps the guarded mask of guilt. The local constabulary, delayed by flooded roads and the tempest's wrath, had yet to arrive, leaving the diminutive figure of Hercule Poirot to assume command. His egg-shaped head gleamed under the chandelier's flickering light, his waxed mustaches twitching as his green eyes, sharp as cut emeralds, swept the room with relentless scrutiny. Clad in his immaculate dinner jacket, his patent leather shoes silent on the polished floor, Poirot moved with the precision of a chess master, his little gray cells already parsing the web of deceit that enveloped the manor. "Mes amis," Poirot declared, his Belgian accent lending a melodic gravitas to his words. "We are in the presence of a crime most heinous. The poison, cyanide, swift and silent, was administered in Monsieur Harrington's goblet, a method requiring intimacy, trust, and opportunity. Until the authorities arrive, no one shall depart this room, and Hercule Poirot shall begin to unravel this tapestry of treachery." His voice, though soft, carried the authority of one accustomed to commanding truth from chaos, and the suspects, despite their agitation, acquiesced to his command. Poirot's first task was to examine the scene, his methodical mind cataloging every detail with the precision of a watchmaker. The victim's goblet, isolated at the head of the table, bore the faint almond scent of cyanide, its ruby contents untouched by any other hand. A scrap of emerald silk, matching Lady Amelia Harrington's gown, was snagged on the leg of a chair near the head of the table, a clue so blatant it seemed almost theatrical, as if placed to mislead. Near the service door, leading to the kitchens, faint muddied footprints marred the polished floor, their size suggesting a man's shoe, yet smudged as if deliberately obscured. The storm's ferocity made an external intruder unlikely, yet the footprints hinted at movement, perhaps a guest who had ventured outside, or a clever scrap seemed too convenient, a red herring designed to divert suspicion. Arthur Harrington, pacing near the fireplace, his lanky frame taut with nervous energy, muttered, "He was a tyrant, always holding the purse strings over me. But murder? I wanted reform, not his death." His auburn hair fell into his bloodshot eyes, his scowl deepening as he spoke. His motive, greed, fueled by gambling debts and a desire to seize the family fortune, was palpable. Yet his clumsy agitation suggested either innocence or a lack of guile. The absence of mud on his shoes, despite his claimed absence, was a discrepancy Poirot filed away, a thread in the tapestry of suspicion. Mr. Victor Slade, his burly frame dominating his chair, leaned forward, his ruddy face glistening with perspiration despite the coolness of the room. "Business rivals abound, Poirot," he growled, his mutton-chop whiskers quivering. "But to suggest one of us here? Preposterous. Harrington and I had our disputes, but this—" His gray eyes flicked to the goblet, then away, an evasive glance that Poirot noted as a psychological clue. Slade's motive, retribution for a merger that had nearly ruined him, was a smoldering ember, yet his physical stillness suggested either shock or a calculated effort to appear blameless. Dr. Elena Voss, the Viennese physician, stood apart, her silver-streaked hair catching the candlelight as she observed the scene with clinical detachment. "As a physician, I can confirm the symptoms. Cyanide is unmistakable, acting within seconds," she said, her German accent crisp. "But I touched nothing beyond checking his pulse." Her blue eyes met Poirot's without flinching, yet her hands, folded neatly, betrayed a faint tremor, a subtle tell that belied her composure.
Her motive, tied to Harrington's wartime profiteering, was a wound that festered beneath her intellectual facade. Yet her professional calm made her an enigma, a potential red herring in the unfolding drama. Eliza Thorne, the maid, hovered near the service door, her slight figure trembling as she clutched a tray. Her freckled cheeks were pale, her dark eyes darting.
Smudging hinted at deliberate concealment. Arthur's timeline discrepancy, his clean shoes despite his claimed absence, was a puzzle, as was Slade's evasive glance when questioned about the wine's provenance. Voss's clinical calm and Eliza's trembling hesitation were psychological clues, each a piece in the mosaic of deceit. A new clue emerged as Poirot examined Harrington's body more closely. A folded letter, slipped from his pocket in his fall, bore the words "repay" or "regret" in fresh ink, its handwriting unfamiliar. The note hinted at blackmail, pointing vaguely at Slade, whose business disputes were well known. Yet its timing and placement suggested a plant, another red herring to divert suspicion. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he considered the possibilities. A murderer among the guests, cloaked in the chaos of the moment, or a more elaborate scheme designed to obscure the truth. "Mes suspects," Poirot said, his voice rising with quiet authority. "The little gray cells, they work tirelessly. The goblet, the silk, the footprints, the letter, all are pieces of a puzzle, but which are true and which are lies? We must look to the heart, the motives, the passions, the secrets." His gaze swept the room, lingering on each face, probing for the flicker of guilt that would betray the culprit. Lady Amelia's protestations grew sharper. "You cannot think me capable, Monsieur Poirot. That silk, it could belong to anyone." Yet her eyes avoided the scrap, a telltale sign of unease. Arthur, halting his pacing, snapped, "I was gone but a moment. Why do you hound me?" His defensiveness, coupled with his clean shoes, deepened the mystery of his whereabouts. Slade's voice was gruff. "That letter is nonsense. Harrington had enemies, but not I." Yet his perspiration betrayed his composure, a physical clue that Poirot noted. Voss, her tone measured, added, "The cyanide was expertly administered. Only one with knowledge could achieve such precision." Her words, meant to deflect, only drew Poirot's attention to her expertise. Eliza, shrinking under scrutiny, murmured, "I only served, sir. I swear it." Her trembling hands suggested fear. But of what? Discovery or the truth? Chapter 5. Whispers from the Past. The banquet hall, now a shrine to the tragedy of Lord Reginald Harrington's silent demise, lay behind Hercule Poirot as he ventured deeper into the labyrinthine corridors of Harrington Manor. The air was heavy with the scent of aged wood and beeswax polish, the flickering light of wall sconces casting long shadows that danced like specters across the paneled walls. Portraits of Harrington ancestors, their stern visages framed in gilded opulence, gazed down with judgmental eyes, as if bearing witness to the secrets that festered within these ancient stones. The storm outside, though relentless, seemed a distant echo now, its thunder a low rumble that underscored the tension within. Poirot, his egg-shaped head gleaming faintly, his waxed mustaches a testament to his fastidious nature, moved with deliberate purpose, his patent leather shoes silent on the Persian rugs. His green eyes, sharp as ever, missed no detail. The scuff on a baseboard, the faint tremor in a servant's hand, as his little gray cells churned, seeking the truth behind the cyanide's silent strike. The murder of Lord Harrington, felled by poison in his own banquet hall, demanded a deeper probe into the motives and histories of those present. Poirot's method was meticulous, his mind a crucible where physical clues and psychological insights melded into a pattern of truth. The manor's corridors, lined with oak doors and ancestral relics, seemed to whisper of past sins, and Poirot, ever attuned to such murmurs, resolved to uncover the secrets that bound the suspects to their victim. His first destination was the servants' quarters, a dim warren of rooms tucked beneath the grand staircase, where the air was redolent of starch and poverty, a stark contrast to the opulence above. Eliza Thorne, the maid, stood before him in a cramped pantry, her slight frame dwarfed by shelves laden with jars of preserves and sacks of flour. Her mousy brown hair, tucked beneath a starched cap, framed a face pale with strain, her freckled cheeks flushed from the scrutiny of Poirot's gaze. Her dark eyes, darting like those of a cornered fox, betrayed a soul burdened by years of servitude. Monsieur whisper. 10 years ago, Lord Harrington, he took a fancy to her. She was a maid here, like me. He promised her the world, then cast her aside when she was ruined. She took her own life, sir, and our family's honor with her. Tears welled in her eyes, her rage a quiet flame beneath her subservient facade. He deserved justice, yes, but I swear I didn't touch his wine. I couldn't. I was in the kitchen when the dessert was served, with cook and the scullery maids to vouch for me. Poirot nodded, his expression inscrutable. Her motive, vengeance for her sister's ruin, was potent, yet her alibi, if verified, was a brick wall. The kitchen staff, questioned briefly, confirmed her presence during the critical moments of the banquet, their accounts consistent with the timeline of the poisoning. Yet Poirot noted a detail. Eliza's knowledge of the manor's routines, her access to the wine cellar, and her proximity to the service door where muddied footprints had been found. Was her confession a red herring, a truth meant to deflect suspicion, or the raw outpouring of a wronged soul? The little grey cells filed it away, a thread in the tapestry of deceit. Leaving the servants' quarters, Poirot ascended to the guest wing, where Dr. Elena Voss occupied a sparsely furnished room, its austerity a reflection of her disciplined nature. The Viennese physician stood by a window, her silver-streaked blonde hair catching the faint glow of a single lamp. Her aquiline features were composed, her blue eyes cold as alpine ice. Yet her posture, rigid, almost defensive, betrayed a mind braced for scrutiny. Clad in her charcoal grey gown, she turned to face Poirot, her movements precise as a metronome. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her German accent crisp. "You seek answers, but I have none to offer. I am a physician, not a poisoner. I confirmed Lord Harrington's death, cyanide as you deduced, but I had no hand in it." Poirot inclined his head, his moustaches twitching. "Madame Voss, your expertise is not in question, but your heart. It carries a burden, no? The war, it left scars, and Lord Harrington's factories, they played a role in such wounds. Tell me, what Harrington's body showed no trace of poison. Her confession, like Eliza's, was a potential red herring, a truth offered to obscure a darker intent. Or was her detachment, a clinical calm, the mark of innocence? Poirot's grey cells churned, weighing her words against the physical evidence. Returning to the banquet hall, Poirot paused by the service door, where the muddied footprints remained, their smudged outlines a puzzle. The size suggested a man's shoe, perhaps Slade's or Arthur's, but the storm's ferocity made an external intruder improbable. He knelt, his patent leather shoes gleaming, and examined the floor. A faint trace of wax, scraped near the footprints, suggested a hurried attempt to obscure them. A clue? Or another misdirection? The emerald silk scrap, still snagged on the chair, pointed to Lady Amelia, yet its placement was too convenient, as if staged for discovery. Poirot summoned the butler, a stooped figure named Jenkins, whose loyalty to the Harringtons spanned decades. "Monsieur Jenkins," Poirot asked, "the wine served tonight, its provenance, its handling. Tell me all." Jenkins, his voice quavering with age, recounted the ritual. The claret, A vintage from Harrington's cellar was decanted by Eliza under his supervision, the goblets filled at the table. No one, he insisted, had tampered with the bottle. Yet Poirot noted a discrepancy. The carafe, now empty, bore a faint residue not unlike the almond scent of cyanide. Had the poison been introduced earlier, or during the chaos of service? The suspects, still gathered in the hall, watched Poirot with varying degrees of unease. Lady Amelia, her emerald eyes glistening, clutched her sapphire ring as if it were a talisman. Arthur, pacing anew, muttered about his father's enemies, his clean shoes a silent contradiction to his claimed absence. Slade, his ruddy face flushed, avoided questions about the merger dispute, his evasiveness a psychological tell. Voss, standing apart, observed with her clinical gaze, while Eliza, tasked with clearing the table, moved with exaggerated care, her eyes never meeting Poirot's. A new lies. His voice, soft yet commanding, silenced the room. The suspects' faces a gallery of unease. The storm outside rumbled, its lightning casting stark shadows across the tapestries, as if illuminating the hidden corners of the human soul. Poirot knew the truth lay in the interplay of evidence and psychology. The physical clues a map, the behavioral tells a compass. The murderer had acted with precision, yet left traces of their intent, whether by design or accident. As the minutes ticked by, the little grey cells worked relentlessly, sifting through the whispers from the past to uncover the hand that had struck the silent blow. Chapter 6. Threads of Deception. The library of Harrington Manor, a cavernous chamber of intellectual refuge, stood in stark contrast to the chaos of the banquet hall where Lord Reginald Harrington had met his silent end. Its towering bookshelves, laden with leather-bound tomes, rose to a vaulted ceiling where shadows clung like secrets to the carved beams. A massive fireplace, its embers glowing faintly, cast a warm but flickering light across the room, illuminating oak-panelled walls adorned with portraits of stern-faced ancestors. The air was thick with the scent of aged paper and polished wood, tinged with the faintest trace of smoke, as if the manor itself exhaled the weight of its history. Outside, the storm had begun to abate, its thunder reduced to a low growl, but the rain persisted, a relentless patter against the leaded windows that sealed the manor in its isolation. Hercule Poirot, his egg-shaped head agleam under the lamplight, his waxed moustaches a study in precision, moved with deliberate grace, his patent leather shoes silent on the Persian rug. His green eyes, sharp as polished jade, scanned the room, missing no detail. The scuff on a table leg, the faint smudge on a ledger, as his little grey cells wove the threads of evidence into a tapestry of truth. The murder of Lord Harrington, felled by cyanide in his wine, demanded a deeper exploration of the manor's secrets, and the library, a repository of the family's records, was Poirot's next arena of inquiry. The physical clues, the emerald silk scrap, the mudded footprint, parchment crisp and freshly inked, a testament to his iron control over the family's fortunes. The document favoured Lady Amelia, bequeathing her the bulk of the estate, manor, factories and investments, while Arthur's inheritance was curtailed by codicils that reduced his allowance to a pittance, a punishment for his profligate ways. The motive for Arthur was clear. Greed, fueled by desperation to escape his debts, could drive a son to patricide. Yet the will's prominence, left unlocked in a drawer, seemed almost too convenient, as if meant to be found. A potential misdirection to cast suspicion on the prodigal son. Poirot's gaze shifted to a ledger, detailing Harrington's business dealings, its pages a litany of ruthless ambition. A recent entry confirmed Victor Slade's grievance, a merger agreement, heavily skewed in Harrington's favor, had left Slade's enterprises on the brink of ruin. The figures, meticulously recorded, revealed a betrayal that could ignite a desire for retribution. Yet Slade's earlier stillness in the banquet hall suggested either innocence or a calculated restraint. A smudged fingerprint on the ledger's edge, too large for Harrington's manicured hands, hinted at another's perusal. Slade, perhaps, or an intruder. Poirot filed the clue away, its significance yet to be determined. The library's door creaked open, admitting Arthur Harrington, his lanky frame slouched, his auburn hair disheveled, as if he had run his hands through it in agitation. His bloodshot eyes darted to the desk, then to Poirot, a flicker of unease crossing his handsome but scowling features. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice petulant, "why do you poke about in father's papers? I had no hand in his death. I was in the lavatory when it happened." His defensiveness, coupled with the earlier discrepancy of his clean shoes, deepened Poirot's suspicion. The detective's moustaches twitched as he replied, "Monsieur Arthur, the truth, it is like a book on these shelves. It reveals itself only to those who seek it. Your absence. It is curious, no? No mud on your shoes, flickering light of a single bulb. The prints, sized for a man's shoe, matched Slade's sturdy boots, yet their smudging suggested an attempt to obscure them. A carafe, identical to the one used at the banquet, stood on a rack, its rim bearing a faint residue that mirrored the almond scent of cyanide. Had the poison been introduced here before the wine reached the table? The timeline was tight. Slade had been in view during the pouring, surrounded by guests, yet his evasive glance when questioned about the wine lingered in Poirot's mind. A red herring, or a clue to his complicity? Returning to the library, Poirot summoned Dr. Elena Voss for a private interview, her silver-streaked hair catching the lamplight as she entered with her characteristic precision. Her aquiline features were composed, her blue eyes steady, yet her hands, clasped tightly, betrayed a subtle tension. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her German accent crisp, "you suspect me, but I am a healer, not a destroyer. My quarrel with Harrington was philosophical. His profiteering during the war was abhorrent, but I sought only to confront him, not to kill." Her words were measured, yet Poirot noted a locket at her throat, its silver surface glinting, a clue from their earlier encounter, containing a photograph of her ruined village. A search of her medical bag, conducted with her consent, revealed a vial of potassium cyanide, its label pristine, but its presence damning. "It is for chemical analysis, not murder," she insisted, her composure cracking slightly. "Someone must have planted it." Her denial was plausible, yet the vial's discovery was another thread of deception, a potential misdirection to implicate her. Poirot's mind raced, weaving the clues together. The will pointed to Arthur, the ledger to Slade, the vial to Voss, yet each seemed too obvious, as if orchestrated to mislead. The footprints, the silk scrap, the blackmail letter, all were physical clues, but their placement suggested a cunning hand at work. The psychological tells were equally compelling: Arthur's ink-stained thumb and defensive bluster, Slade's evasive glance and financial ruin, Voss' planted vial and physical clues, a map. The behavioral tells, a compass. The cyanide had required access, opportunity, and knowledge. Yet the murderer's hand had left traces, whether by design or error. As he prepared to return to the banquet hall, where the suspects awaited, Poirot's gray cells churned, unraveling the threads of deception to reveal the hand that had struck the silent blow. Chapter 7. The veil lifts. Slightly. The grand corridors of Harrington Manor, their oak-paneled walls steeped in the weight of centuries, seemed to close in around Hercule Poirot as he moved with measured steps, his patent leather shoes silent on the polished floors. The storm outside had subsided to a mournful drizzle, its once furious gales now a whisper, as if the elements themselves paused to mourn the tragedy within. The air was heavy with the scent of lavender and wax, a faint undercurrent of the banquet hall's almond-tinged poison, lingering like a ghost. The manor, isolated by the tempest's aftermath, was a crucible of suspicion, its every shadow concealing a fragment of truth. Poirot's egg-shaped head gleamed under the flickering sconces, his waxed mustaches a testament to his fastidious nature, his green eyes sharp as they parsed the manor's secrets. The little gray cells, ever vigilant, churned through the web of clues, physical, psychological, and temporal, that bound the suspects to the murder of Lord Reginald Harrington. The banquet hall, where the industrialist had met his silent end, remained a frozen tableau of chaos, the mahogany table strewn with spilled claret, the emerald silk scrap snagged on a chair, the muddied footprints near the service door, the blackmail letter, the cyanide-tainted carafe, the ink-stained ledger. All were threads in a tapestry of deception, each potentially a red herring, crafted to mislead. Poirot's inquiries had uncovered motives aplenty: Lady Amelia's yearning for freedom, Arthur's greed, Slade's financial betrayal, Voss's wartime grudge, Eliza's vengeful past. Yet the truth remained elusive, hidden in the interplay of evidence and human nature. The library and wine cellar had yielded their secrets, but now Poirot sought to probe deeper, to lift the veil of deception through direct confrontation.
The sapphire ring, clasped tightly, betraying the strain beneath her composure. Poirot inclined his head, his tone gentle yet probing. "Madame, the heart, it speaks when the lips are silent. Your marriage, it was a cage, no? Freedom, inheritance, such motives are powerful. And the silk, it matches your gown too perfectly, as if placed to draw the eye." His green eyes fixed on hers, noting the subtle dilation of her pupils, a psychological tell of unease. Amelia's breath caught, and she turned away, her fingers brushing a locket at her throat, a new clue, its silver surface etched with a lover's initials, not her husband's. "I loved another once," she admitted, her voice barely audible. "A cousin, distant but dear. Reginald knew, and his jealousy was a chain, but murder, I could not." Her tears seemed genuine, yet Poirot noted the careful phrasing, the practiced sorrow. The locket suggested an affair, a motive for freedom beyond inheritance, but her emotional display was too polished, a potential red herring to deflect suspicion. He filed the detail away, his gray cells weighing her psychology against the physical evidence. Leaving the boudoir, Poirot sought Victor Slade in the manor's smoking room, a dimly lit chamber redolent of tobacco and leather. Slade, his burly frame slouched in an armchair, clutched a tumbler of whiskey, his ruddy face flushed with agitation. His mutton-chop whiskers quivered as he met Poirot's gaze, his gray eyes narrowing. "Poirot, this is madness," he growled. "That blackmail letter, it's a fabrication. Harrington's enemies were legion, but I fought him in boardrooms, not with poison." His hands, calloused from his early days of labor, trembled slightly, a physical clue of distress or guilt. "Monsieur Slade," Poirot replied, his voice calm but incisive. "The ledger, it tells a tale of betrayal. Your merger, it left you ruined, no? Retribution is a motive most compelling." He gestured to the fingerprint on the ledger, its size matching Slade's broad thumb. Slade's face darkened, his denial swift. "I looked at his books, yes, to understand."
"Told you, I was in the hall. The clock's always been faulty."
His defensiveness, coupled with the ink stain from the ledger, reinforced his motive of greed. But the clock's tampering hinted at a broader conspiracy. Dr. Elena Voss, encountered in the corridor, maintained her clinical calm, her silver-streaked hair gleaming under the sconces. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her German accent crisp, "the cyanide vial in my bag was planted. I am no fool to leave such evidence." Her blue eyes were steady, yet her fingers tightened around her locket, a subtle tell of anxiety. Poirot nodded, his mind revisiting the vial's pristine label, too perfect for a physician's daily use. Her wartime grudge remained a potent motive, but the planted vial suggested a frame, a red herring to divert suspicion. Eliza Thorne, clearing debris in the banquet hall, shrank under Poirot's gaze, her freckled cheeks pale. "I served nothing more," she insisted, her dark eyes darting to the service door where the footprints lay. Poirot noted her proximity to the carafe, her knowledge of the manor's routines, but her alibi, confirmed by the kitchen staff, held firm. Her vengeful motive was undeniable, yet her fear seemed too raw, a possible misdirection. A new clue emerged. A discarded wine glass, hidden beneath a napkin, bore a faint lipstick mark, crimson, matching Lady Amelia's shade. Had she sipped from Harrington's goblet, or was it another plant? The clock's tampering, the lipstick, the locket, the ledger's fingerprint, all were threads, yet each could be a lie. Poirot's mind raced, weaving the physical and psychological clues into a pattern. Amelia's affair, Slade's betrayal, Arthur's debts, Voss's vengeance, Eliza's rage. Each motive was a shadow, but which cast the darkest? "The veil lifts slightly," Poirot murmured, his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze distant. "The murderer, they are clever, but the little gray cells, they see the inconsistencies, the clock, the glass, the heart's hidden truths." His voice, soft yet commanding, resonated in the hall. The suspects' faces a gallery, goblets glinting dully, and candelabra, flickering like weary sentinels, bore witness to the unraveling drama. The tapestries, their heraldic lions seeming to snarl in silent judgment, absorbed the tension that crackled in the air, as palpable as the storm's fading breath outside. The drizzle, a mournful whisper against the leaded windows, sealed the manor in its isolation, transforming it into a prison where secrets could no longer hide. Hercule Poirot, his egg-shaped head agleam under the chandelier's waning light, his waxed mustaches a paragon of precision, stood at the room's center, his patent leather shoes silent on the polished floor. His green eyes, sharp as cut emeralds, swept over the assembled suspects, parsing their every gesture, their every glance, as his little gray cells wove the tangled threads of motive and evidence into a pattern of truth. The cyanide that had silenced Lord Harrington demanded a perpetrator with access, opportunity, and a motive as potent as the poison itself. The physical clues, the emerald silk scrap, the muddied footprints, the blackmail letter, the tainted carafe, the lipstick-stained glass, were a labyrinth of misdirection, each potentially a red herring planted to obscure the murderer's hand. The psychological tells, Lady Amelia's calculated poise, Arthur's defensive bluster, Slade's evasive silence, Voss's clinical detachment, Eliza's trembling fear, were threads in a web of deception, each suspect's motive entangled with the others. Poirot's inquiries had peeled back layers of the past, revealing Amelia's illicit affair, Arthur's gambling debts, Slade's financial ruin, Voss's wartime grudge, and Eliza's vengeful loss. Yet the truth remained elusive, a shadow dancing just beyond reach. Now, in the banquet hall, Poirot sought to tighten the net, to provoke the reactions that would betray the guilty soul. The suspects, summoned once more to the hall,
sat or stood in uneasy clusters, their faces a gallery of strain. Lady Amelia Harrington, her midnight blue robe a stark contrast to her earlier emerald gown, sat with rigid grace, her porcelain hands clasped tightly, her sapphire ring
Yet resonant, its Belgian cadence cutting through the murmurs. Mes amis, the web of this crime, it is intricate, no? The cyanide, it was no accident. It required a hand both bold and cunning. The clues, they point in many directions. The silk to Madame Amelia, the footprints to Monsieur Slade, the letter to a blackmailer, the glass to a hidden act. But the heart, it reveals what the eyes conceal. Let us examine the motives, for they are entangled like vines. He turned first to Lady Amelia, his gaze piercing. Madame, your locket, it speaks of a love forbidden, a cousin who offered escape from a marriage that chained you. The silk scrap, it matches your gown, and the lipstick on the glass, crimson like your own. Did you seek freedom through death? Amelia's breath caught, her hands tightening. Monsieur Poirot, you twist my pain into accusation. Yes, I loved another, but Reginald's death gains me nothing but grief. Her voice trembled, yet her eyes avoided the silk scrap, a psychological tell of evasion. The locket, the lipstick, both pointed to her, yet their obviousness suggested a frame, a red herring to divert suspicion. Poirot pivoted to Arthur, his tone sharp. Monsieur Arthur, your debts, they are a noose, and the will, it cuts you off. Your absence during the banquet, your ink-stained thumb from the ledger. Did you seek to claim your inheritance by force? Arthur's scowl deepened, his hands fidgeting with his cufflinks. I hated his control, yes, but I didn't touch his wine. I was in the hall, I swear. His defensiveness, coupled with the clean shoes contradicting his claimed absence, deepened the mystery. The tempered clock, its uneven chimes, suggested a manipulated timeline, perhaps to cover his movements or another's. To Slade, Poirot's voice was a velvet blade. Monsieur Slade, the ledger reveals your ruin at Harrington's hands. The footprints, they match your boots, and the blackmail letter hints at your desperation. Did you strike to reclaim your empire? Slade's ruddy face darkened, his gray eyes
suggested either innocence or a fear of discovery. Poirot noted her proximity to the carafe, her knowledge of the manor's routines, a thread yet to be fully unraveled. A new clue emerged. A crumpled note, found tucked beneath a candelabrum, bore the words, "Justice for the past," in a hurried scrawl. Its anonymity pointed to Voss or Eliza, their motives tied to historical wrongs, yet its placement suggested another plant, a red herring to muddy the waters. The tempered clock, the lipstick-stained glass, the locket, the ledger's fingerprint, the footprints, all were physical clues, yet each could be a lie. The psychological tells were equally compelling. Amelia's evasive eyes, Arthur's fidgeting hands, Slade's perspiring brow, Voss's tightened grip, Eliza's darting glance. Each suspects motive, freedom, greed, retribution, vengeance, justice, was a vine in the entangled web, but which held the poison? Poirot paced, his hands clasped behind his back, his voice rising with quiet authority. The web tightens, may suspects. The murderer, they have woven a clever tapestry, but the threads they betray. The clock, it lies about the time. The glass, it speaks of a hidden act. The note, it cries for justice. But the heart, it cannot hide forever. His words silenced the room. The suspects' faces a gallery of unease as they felt the net closing. The drizzle outside cast a mournful veil over the manor, its windows reflecting the flickering candles like eyes watching the drama unfold. Poirot knew the truth lay in the delicate balance of evidence and psychology. The physical clues, a map. The behavioral tells, a compass. The murderer had acted with precision, yet their hand had left traces, whether by design or error. As he prepared to gather the suspects for a final reckoning, the little gray cells worked relentlessly, untangling the motives to reveal the hand that had struck the silent blow. Chapter 9. The Assembly of Truth. The banquet hall of Harrington Manor, its opulence now dimmed by the shadow of murder, stood as a solemn arena where truth and deception would soon collide. The long mahogany table, still littered with the remnants of the fatal
flicker of emotion, as his little grey cells prepared to unravel the web of deceit that cloaked the murderer's hand. The cyanide that had silenced Lord Harrington in mid-toast demanded a perpetrator with cunning, access, and a motive as lethal as the poison itself. The physical clues, the emerald silk scrap, the muddied footprints, the blackmail letter, the tainted carafe, the lipstick-stained glass, the anonymous note, were a maze of misdirection, each potentially a red herring designed to obscure the truth. The psychological tells, Lady Amelia's calculated poise, Arthur's defensive fidgeting, Slade's evasive silence, Voss's clinical detachment, Eliza's trembling fear, were threads in a tapestry of motives, each suspect bound to the victim by greed, betrayal, vengeance, or freedom. Poirot's inquiries had peeled back layers of secrets. Amelia's illicit affair, Arthur's gambling debts, Slade's financial ruin, Voss's wartime grudge, Eliza's vengeful loss. The tampered clock, the ink-stained ledger, the planted vial, all pointed to a murderer who wove deception with precision, yet left traces of their intent. Now, in this assembly of truth, Poirot sought to provoke the final revelations that would expose the guilty soul. The suspects, summoned once more to the banquet hall, sat or stood in a tense tableau, their faces etched with strain. Lady Amelia Harrington, her midnight blue robe a somber contrast to her earlier emerald gown, sat with rigid elegance, her porcelain hands clasped, her sapphire ring catching the candlelight. Her emerald eyes, glistening with unshed tears, held a flicker of defiance, as if daring Poirot to accuse her. Arthur Harrington, slouched near the fireplace, his lanky frame taut with agitation, ran a hand through his dishevelled auburn hair, his bloodshot eyes darting nervously. Victor Slade, his burly frame dominating a chair, gripped its arms, his ruddy face flushed, his mutton-chop whiskers quivering with suppressed emotion. Dr. Elena Voss stood apart, her silver-streaked hair gleaming, her aquiline features impassive, her blue eyes cold as she surveyed the scene with clinical precision. Eliza Thorne, hovering near the service door, her slight figure trembling, clutched lipstick on the glass. It mirrors your shade. Did you poison the wine to escape your cage? Amelia's breath caught, her hands tightening. Monsieur Poirot, you weave a cruel tale. My love was a dream, not a motive for murder. That silk, that glass, they are lies planted to trap me. Her voice trembled, but her eyes avoided the silk scrap, a psychological tell of evasion. The locket and lipstick were compelling, yet their obviousness suggested a frame, a red herring to divert suspicion. Poirot pivoted to Arthur, his tone sharp. Monsieur Arthur, your debts, they are a noose, and the will, it denies you your birthright. Your absence, your ink-stained thumb, the tampered clock. Did you strike to seize the fortune? Arthur's scowl deepened, his hands fidgeting with his cufflinks. I hated his control, but I didn't touch his wine. I was in the hall, I swear. His defensiveness, coupled with the clean shoes contradicting his claimed absence, deepened the mystery. The tampered clock, its uneven chimes,
suggested a manipulated timeline, perhaps to cover his movements, or another's. To Slade, Poirot's voice was a velvet blade. "Monsieur Slade, the ledger reveals your ruin at Harrington's hands. The footprints, they match your boots. The blackmail letter hints at your desperation. Did you strike to reclaim your empire?" Slade's ruddy face darkened, his grey eyes flashing. "That letter's a fabrication, Poirot. I fought Harrington with contracts, not poison." His trembling hands, free of chemical residue, suggested fear rather than guilt. Yet his evasive glance about the wine lingered in Poirot's mind. Dr. Voss, her posture rigid, met Poirot's gaze unflinchingly. "The vial in my bag was planted, Monsieur Poirot," she said, her German accent crisp. "My quarrel with Harrington was moral, not murderous." Her blue eyes were steady, yet her fingers tightened around her locket, a subtle tell of anxiety.
Justice was a thread, but which led to the truth? Poirot paced, his hands clasped behind his back, his voice rising with quiet authority. "The web tightens, May suspects. The murderer, they have woven a clever tapestry, but the threads, they betray. The scratch, it speaks of a ring. The clock, it lies about the time. The note, it cries for justice. The heart, it cannot hide forever." His words silenced the room. The suspects' faces a gallery of unease as they felt the net closing. The drizzle outside had ceased, the manor's windows reflecting the flickering candles like eyes watching the drama unfold. Poirot knew the truth lay in the delicate balance of evidence and psychology, the physical clues a map, the behavioral tells a compass. The murderer had acted with precision, yet their hand had left traces, whether by design or error. As he prepared for the final revelation, the little grey cells worked relentlessly, assembling the truth from the entangled motives to reveal the hand that had struck the silent blow. Chapter 10. The Grand Revelation. The banquet hall of Harrington Manor, its once opulent splendour now a shadowed stage for justice, stood as the final arena where Hercule Poirot would unveil the truth behind Lord Reginald Harrington's murder. The long mahogany table, strewn with the relics of the fatal feast, spilled claret staining the damask cloth, crystal goblets glinting dully, and candelabra casting accusatory shadows, seemed to hold its breath, as if the very walls of the manor anticipated the revelation. The tapestries, their heraldic lions poised as if in judgment, absorbed the tension that crackled in the air, a palpable force that bound the suspects in a web of fear and anticipation. Outside, the storm had relented, leaving only a mournful drizzle, its faint patter against the leaded windows a soft requiem for the fallen industrialist. Hercule Poirot, his egg-shaped head gleaming under the chandelier's faltering light, his waxed moustaches a paragon of precision, stood at the head of the table, his patent leather shoes silent on the polished floor. His green eyes, sharp as cut emeralds, swept over the assembled company. Vengeance. Justice. Poirot's inquiries had unravelled secrets. Amelia's illicit affair, Arthur's gambling debts, Slade's financial ruin, Voss' wartime grudge, Eliza's vengeful loss. Each clue, each tell, had been meticulously catalogued by the little grey cells, and now, in this final assembly, the truth would be laid bare. The suspects, gathered once more in the banquet hall, sat or stood in a tense tableau, their faces a gallery of dread. Lady Amelia Harrington, a midnight blue robe a sombre veil, sat with rigid grace, her porcelain hands clasped, a sapphire ring catching the candlelight. Her emerald eyes glistening yet defiant, met Poirot's gaze with a flicker of challenge. Arthur Harrington, slouched near the fireplace, his lanky frame taut, ran a hand through his dishevelled auburn hair, his bloodshot eyes darting nervously. Victor Slade, his burly frame dominating a chair, gripped its arms, his ruddy face flushed, his mutton-chop whiskers quivering. Dr. Elena Voss stood apart, her silver-streaked hair gleaming, her aquiline features impassive, her blue eyes cold as alpine ice. Eliza Thorne, hovering near the service door, her slight figure trembling, clutched a tray, her freckled cheeks pale, her dark eyes darting like those of a hunted creature. Poirot began, his voice a melodic cadence, its Belgian accent resonant with authority. Mes amis, the hour of truth has arrived. The murder of Lord Harrington, it was a deed most cunning. A silent strike by a hand that knew his habits, his trust, his wine. The clues, they are many: silk, footprints, letters, glass, notes, scratches, clocks. But they are threads in a web woven to deceive. The heart, it betrays what the hand conceals. And now, Hercule Poirot shall reveal the murderer. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room, the silence heavy with anticipation. Let us consider the evidence. The silk scrap, it points to Madame Amelia, yet it is too obvious, a plant to mislead. The footprints, they suggest
Monsieur Arthur, your debts, your disinheritance, your absence, they suggest greed. The ink-stained thumb, the tampered clock, did you alter the timeline to cover your act? Arthur's scowl deepened, his hands fidgeting. I hated him, but I didn't touch his wine. I was in the hall. His defensiveness, coupled with his clean shoes, was a puzzle, but not the key. To Slade, Poirot's voice was a velvet blade. Monsieur Slade, your ruin, your footprints, your evasive glance, retribution was your motive. Did you poison the wine to reclaim your empire? Slade's face darkened. That letter's a lie. I fought him with contracts, not poison. His trembling hands suggested fear, not guilt. To Voss, Poirot's tone was measured. Madame Voss, you're vile. Your wartime grudge, vengeance, is a powerful motive. Yet the vial, it is too pristine. A plant. Voss's blue eyes were steady. I sought justice, not murder, she said, her locket a silent reminder of her loss. To Eliza, Poirot's gaze was gentle yet probing. Madame Thorne, your sister's ruin, your access to the carafe, justice was your motive. Yet your alibi holds. Eliza's eyes darted. I served, nothing more, she whispered, her fear raw. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. The murderer is Lady Amelia Harrington. His voice rose, triumphant yet somber. The cyanide, it was administered in the wine during a moment of intimacy, a feigned embrace, a touch of the hand, concealed by a glove. The motive? Freedom from a marriage that suffocated, amplified by an affair that promised liberation. The inheritance, it was a bonus, not the heart. The silk scrap, she planted it herself. A red herring to suggest a frame. The lipstick-stained glass, it was hers. A mistake she could not erase. The scratch on the table, it came from her sapphire ring, grazed in her haste. The tampered clock, she adjusted it to blur the timeline, to confuse the moment of poisoning. He paused, his eyes locked on Amelia. But the proof, it is in the smallest detail. The residue of cyanide, faint.
Eliza's tray trembled. Justice, Poirot knew, was a bitter draught. But it was served. Dear listener, thus concludes Hercule Poirot and the Banquet of Silent Death. The truth, It is a light that pierces the darkest shadows. Until next time, keep your grey cells alert, for the heart, it always betrays.